Okay, so we're up to the Mishnah here on Daf Chav Zayin, and this sugya is a lot of this sugya is about Hashavas Aveda, as it pertains to a get that was lost. Hamevi get. So the get was written, Kidasu Gittin, and it was brought by a shliach, the Avadi Menu, but he can't find it now. And the Mishnah makes the following distinction: Mitzoli altar. If he finds it immediately, the Gemara is going to have many, many different shitos about what lialter means. Kosher. Then he gives the get over to the Isha, and it's a kosher get. In Lav, but however, if he didn't find it immediately, but rather after a certain period of time, in Posel, we're always afraid that maybe there was another person who had the same name as him, and his wife had the same name as his wife, and he had written this get, and he had lost the get. So we're not sure that this get is his original get that was written lishma. Mitzo, however, if he finds it b'chafisa, in a certain kind of a kli, which Rashi says it's a chemas shel or alternatively bedluskima. Blusma was a kind of a big sack that they used to use to carry things. And even if, let's say, he doesn't recognize the get per se, but nevertheless he recognizes the kli that was used as a receptacle for the get, and that's called imakiro, is kosher. Now here, exactly how to understand the words in Makiro is a big machlokas. Makiro means what we call tvias ayin, that he can look at something and know that that's the same thing without having a siman. And that seems to be the way Rashi understands this Mishnah, in which case you can return the kli and the get within the kli with tvias ayin, even if he doesn't recognize the get itself. However, the Ramban disagrees, and we'll just see how he formulates the Ramban here. Yeah, the Ramban says you have a double condition here. Number one, he recognizes the kli b'tvias ayin, and the Ramban says that Polshkein im makir es haget atzmo kosher. So it means, according to the Ramban, there are two possibilities here. You can have makiro, which means he recognizes the kli, and that's called tvias ayin. Alternatively, if he recognizes the get itself, we can return the get. Either Tana says that he recognizes the kli, and the answer is, says the Ramban, it's not so commonplace that he would recognize the get with tvias ayin. Now here the Ramban has a big chiddush, because the Gemara Bava Metzia, we'll see it here also, establishes that we only return an aveda b'tvias ayin to a tzurba mirabanan, who never lies. Because without a siman, there's really no objective proof. And the Ramban answers that sugya is when somebody else finds it, and he has to return it. Adro shachicha imach. And normally we don't return an aveda just because somebody says, well, I recognize it as mine. However, here the Baal found his own get, or the shliach alternatively. And therefore, he says to himself, I know that this is the get that was written for me and given to me, and I lost it. And therefore, he's believed with tvias ayin. Because basically, he didn't even have to tell anybody that he lost the get. Nobody would have suspected it. Now the Gemara asks a stira on two Mishnayos. Uraminu, and we're going to ask a kasha. And here in the Mesoras Hashas, he writes that the Mishnah we're about to quote is from Bab Metzia Daf Yud Ches. And the Mishnah there, Bab Metzia, says, Matzah Gittin Noshim v'shechrurei avodim daiseki or matanos v'shovrin hareza lo yachs. Shani omer ksubim hoyu v'nimlach aleim shelo litna. So the Mishnah here enumerates the following. We've got a get that you found, or a shtar shichur avodim, or daiseki. Daiseki is what's called a matnas shchivmera. And it's no trikun. The word daiseki is no trikun. It's a short form for da tehei lemekim v'lios. In other words, that these things really are chal through amira. And we don't need an extra kinyan because divrei shchivmera kiksuvim ksuvim tamim. But of course, they would record it so that the person who received the gift from the shchivmera could prove that he received that gift. Then we have a shtar matana in the case of a healthy person, or a shovrim, which is a receipt, a shtar piron halva. So in all these cases, we do not return the get, not to the Baal, not to the Isha, and in other shtaros, we don't give the get, the shtar back to the love or to the malva. Shani Omer, because I assume that maybe, perhaps, even after he wrote the get, he had a change of heart, and he decided either not to divorce his wife, not to be meshacher his ever, not to give this gift, etc., etc. And the Gemara now understands from the Mishnah Bab Metzia that only because of that chashash, that maybe he changed his mind, that's why we don't return the get, not to the Baal, not to the Isha. And the diuk is as follows: Ha'omar tnu. But if, let's say, the Baal says, you know what, return this get to the Isha, and it's proof positive that he didn't change his mind, then the implication of the Mishnah Bab Metzia is no sin. Now, the Mishnah doesn't differentiate between whether he found this get lialter or liachar zman, afilu liachar zman. So this chashash that we saw in our Mishnah, that imlav possible, that if we found it only liachar zman, we're choshesh that maybe there's another person who has the same name, blah, 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 and he lost the get, that doesn't appear at all. And it's not indicated at all in the Mishnah in Bab Metzia. The Mishnah Bab Metzia is only trying to remove one chashash before we can return the get, and that is nimlach. But other than nimlach, if we have reason to believe that he didn't change his mind at any point, because he himself says, give this get to my wife, then we can return the get. We're not afraid that this is the wrong get. Now here at this point, the Bali Tosfos ask a very, very fundamental question. L'chora, the Gemara's kash is not a kash at all. Why? Because the issue about returning the get in the Mishnah Bab Metzia is not for the purpose of gerushin. She already is meguresha, she received the get, but rather for purpose of raya, meaning that she should hold on to the get as a proof if anybody suspects when she wants to get married that she's married to the first husband, then she'll produce this get. So that now the Mishnah says, we don't have to worry about whether the get is lishma and it was written for this Baal, or it was written for another person with the same names. That's irrelevant. What difference does it make whether this is the original get or not a get? As long as the Baal testifies that he divorced her and give her the get as a raya, it makes no difference. If you're dealing with the issue of whether or not he can give the get, or the shliach wants to deliver the get. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I forgot to shut off my phone, sorry. So let's again, just to, this is more for an Ian shir, but just to review the Kasha Tosfos, there's no stira between our Mishnah L'chora and the Mishnah in Bava Metzia. The Mishnah Bava Metzia wants to know if, based on the fact that we have no suffix in our mind that he divorced his wife, because he himself admits that he divorced his wife, but the question is whether we could return that get to the Yad HaIsha, and she claims that she lost the get, so that the get in her hands will be a proof, a raya, that she was divorced. If she goes to a far-off country, she'll produce the get if there's a rumor that she was married to another man. And therefore, we don't have to be choshesh that maybe there's another get that was delivered to her because of, somebody else has the same names. What difference does it make? It's irrelevant. Whereas our Mishnah is talking about a situation of, for example, a shliach who wants to deliver the get to his wife. And there's a chashash, maybe there's another get that was written with the same names, and this is not the real get. So that's the problem that the Rishonim raise over here. In any event, Omar Rabba, lo kasha, kan b'mokum shayos mitzuyos, v'kan b'mokum she'ein shayos mitzuyos. Now, if we only had this statement of Rabba, let's interpret Rabba as is. The Gemara is going to add another very, very critical piece to the puzzle here of Rabba. Rabba is saying that if we have a place that's located in a center of transportation where people are moving back and forth, coming from the outside, then we really have to worry about the possibility, and that's our Mishnah, that maybe there's another person with the same name. But in the Mishnah Bava Metzia, this is a town that's isolated. There's very little, very infrequent transportation, and we don't have to worry that maybe this get fell from the hands of someone who has the same name and came from a different city. And we're going to see later on in the Gemara that if ein shayoros mitzuyos, then he can use this get to divorce his wife. And that's going to apply, as the Gemara is going to add, even if Huchzaku Shnei Yosef and Shimon b'Yerachas. We know that in that city where we found the get, there's another person and his wife. They both have the same names as this fellow who is now going to deliver the get. That's what the Gemara adds right now. Even though Rabbah seems to imply that if there are frequent transportation, then we have to worry about the fact that there's another get with the same names, and therefore we can't return the get to this Baal or this Shliach. For who that only applies if you have what we call Tarti L'Reis. So another negative thing, that we know for sure that there are two Yosef ben Shimons and probably Leah bas Yaakovs in the same city. So if two conditions are checked off, then we can't return the get. What are those two conditions? Number one, there are shayoros coming from outside. And number two, we know that there's another person with the same name as the Baal who wants to deliver the get. So imagine, you have here Tarti L'Reisa, because number one, it could be another Yosef ben Shimon with the same identical name, drop this get. So it's not this Yosef ben Shimon. And number two, we have another fear that maybe there's another Yosef ben Shimon who came from the outside through the Shayos Mitzuyos, and he dropped the get. And the Gemara now wants to prove that Rabbah holds that you need both minuses in order to block returning the get. The Gemara is going to argue from the opposite point of view. And if you're going to tell me that according to Rabbah, as long as there's shayoros mitzuyos, we don't return the get, and it's irrelevant whether we have a chazaka, we know that there is another Yosef ben Shimon or not, then you're going to have a contradiction between two statements of Rabbah. And we'll soon see that when they found this get in the Bezdin of Rav Huna, and the get was brought there for the purpose of Kiyum Ashtar, and somehow the get got lost in the Bezdin itself after the Kiyum Ashtar, and the issue of Rav Huna is going to be whether or not we can return this get to the person who's claiming it's his get. And Rav Huna is going to ask Rabbah to think about it. After Rav Huna expresses his opinion, he tells Rabbah, I want you to think it over and analyze the case. Maybe you could bring a proof from another Mishnah. Haliksiv Bey, in this get it said, Bishviri Masa, in a place called Shviri, the Al Rachis Nara, that's located on the city, on the river of Rachis. And in that particular city called Shviri, there was no one else who had the same name as the names written in the get. V'yomer Rav Huna, nevertheless, Choshin l'shnei Shviri. Okay, it's true that there's no one else in Shviri that has the same name, but maybe there's another Shviri. So somewhere on the face of the map, there's another Shviri. And in that other city called Shviri, there's a person who has the same name. So here in local Shviri, in this Bezdin of Rav Huna, in the area of the Bezdin of Rav Huna, there's no one else with that same name. But there may be another Shviri, and in that other Shviri, there's another person who has the same name, and maybe the get fell from him. The Amalei Rav Chizda Rabbah, Rav Chizda tipped off Rabbah, and he warned him, Hook the Ayabo, you better spend some time checking it out. The Le'urt, I can promise you that tomorrow morning, Boila Minach, Rav Huna is going to ask you for your opinion. And he's going to test you and see whether you agreed with it. Nafak, Rabbah goes out, dog, and he checks out the Mishnayos with great meticulous care, analyzing them, V'yashka. And he found a Mishnah, and from the Mishnah it was clear to Rabbah that we're not afraid of another get that was written for another person with the same name if there's no Huchzak, Shnei Yosef ben Shimon be'irachas. This non kol ma'aseh bezdin areza yachzit. Now let's just see where this Mishnah is. Just 1 second. This non vav. Again, I think it's in Bab Metzia, I'm not sure. And he says that if you find a shtar that's mekuyim in Bezdin, then we're not choshesh that maybe there's another place and there's other people with those same names from that other place, but rather we return the get or the shtar to the one who's claiming the shtar. And for sure, we know that the Malva dropped the shtar, and the Lova can't claim that he dropped the shtar because the Lova doesn't bring a shtar to a Bezdin for Kiyuv. It's only a Malva who brings a shtar to Bezdin for a Kiyuv. So now the Gemara is going to analyze the raya that we brought that forces us to interpret Rabbah that there are two conditions when they're both met that we don't return the get. No, it's Rabbi Mitzuyim Sham. They come in for din, for judgment. They come in for hora to get an answer to a question. Vikapashin, and yet Rabbah from the Mishnah understood that Yachzer, we give the shtar back to the Malva, and we're not choshesh that maybe there's another place somewhere out there where there's another person with the same name, and he's the Baal Shtar. Alma, we see that Rabbah will only refuse to return the get if there's another condition, and that's an in. Then we have to worry that maybe this shtar fell from another person in the same city who has the same name. But if we have no chazaka, we don't have to be choshesh that there's another person who has the identical names, but rather we give back the shtar. In this case, we give back the shtar to the malva, and that's even though there's shayoros mitzuyos. So it means that Rabbah requires, number one, shayoros mitzuyos, and number two, huchsaku shnei yosef ben be'ir achas, and only then, if you check off those two boxes, then you don't return the get or the shtar. Afad Rabbah uvda balhu gita dishtaka be kisana. We'll have two opinions about what be kisana refers to. Bifun pedisa. And when Rabbah returned a get that he found, kishmaite, he was consistent with his interpretation of our Mishnah, that we can return the get to the Baal, and we're not afraid it fell from someone else who has the same names, unless it's Shayoros Mitzuyos and Huchzaku Shnei Yosef and Shimon Birachas. And in that case of Bei Kisana, they did not fulfill these two conditions, and therefore Rabbah ruled that we return the shtar to its bailam. But here we have a machlokes about what this place called Bei Kisana is all about. According to one view, B'duchta Hecha de Saru Kisna, Kisana. It's a place where they take kutna's cotton, and they soak it in order to remove the impurities. And therefore, v'afal gavda huchzaku, even if we have knowledge that there are two Yosef and Shimon, but it's lo shchichan shayarasa. We don't have shayaras mitzuyos, because we're not talking about a place where they sell in the marketplace the fully processed cotton. That would be shayaras mitzuyos, but rather we're talking about, a private place that's owned by a certain person, and that's where he's soaking his kisna. And therefore, we can return the get, because even though it's Huchzaku Shnei Yosef ben Shimon, but nevertheless it's not Shayos Mitzuyos. Because the Amir others say, B'duchtu Mizabne Kisana, this place called Bei Kisana, where Rabbah Paskin to return the get, was a public place where they sell kusna, and people are coming in constantly, waves of people to buy kusna. But for Hushalo Huchzaku, but we don't have two people that we know have the same name. Therefore, Nachosha said it fell from somebody else. And even though Shchichi Shayaros, there are plenty of Shayaros going back and forth here, but nevertheless we could turn the get, because the bottom line is Rabbah holds that we only are inhibited from returning the get if both conditions are extant. Number one is Shayaros Mitzuyas, and number two, Huchzaku Shnei Yosef ben Shimon. Now let's please make a note, so that when we go to the next sugya, that the original question of the Gemara, which Rabbah tried to answer, was a stira between our Mishnah here in Gittin and the Mishnah in Bab Mitzia of Motza Gittin Noshim. And that's where Rabbah came up with his distinction. Depends whether Shayaros Mitzuyos or not Shayaros Mitzuyos. Rab Zera is going to ask a kasha on our Mishnah, but not from the Mishnah in Bab Mitzia, but from a Brisa, Umishani. So Rabbi Zera Rami Maslisa Brisa Umishani. Rabbi Zera posited a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Brisa. And again, the Gemara is going to analyze why Rabbi Zera was not satisfied with the kasha of Rabbah from one Mishnah to another Mishnah. But Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Hamevi get v'ovedi menu motzo lialter kosher lav posel. So what are we afraid of? We're afraid that maybe if he didn't find the get immediately, it's not really his get that he lost, but it's a get that somebody else lost that has the same names. Uraminu, right? And that was the case, according to Rabbah, of Shayos Mitzuyos and of Huchzaku Shnei Yosef ben Shimon Birachas. Uraminu, and now Rabbi said he's going to ask us here from a Brisa. What do we have in a Brisa? Motza get Isha Bashuk. Bisman Shabal Moda Yachzir Isha. Ein Abal Moda Lo Yachzir Lo Lazet. If the Baal admits that he divorced his wife, give the get back to the wife, and she'll have it as a raya to prove that she was divorced. If the Baal denies that he divorced her, then we can't give the get back neither to the Baal nor to the Isha. We can't give it to the Baal because maybe there will be Eidei Mesira, and the Baal is going to bring these Eidei Mesira, and he's going to claim that he already paid up the ksuba. And the get was given to him by the Isha when he paid up the ksuba, and he dropped the get. And now if we give the get back to the Baal, then he's going to prove that he received he's going to argue, and it'll be a very powerful argument that he received the get, Tmura, in payment, in lieu of payment to the Ksuba, so she can't collect the Ksuba. Now, we can't give the get back to the Isha because maybe she was not divorced with this get. And then she'll go and get married based on this get to someone else. So that's in a case of Ein Abal Mod. And now the Gemara is going to be Medayek.